this wasn't the last time they played. But in 1896, Ohio State beat Otterbein 12-0. Where was the game played? Just think about that a little bit. And we'll come back to that at the end of the program, and we'll see if anybody knows where the 1896, which is a key year, the 1896 Otterbein Ohio State game was played. Today we're talking about the leadership secrets of football's master coaches, connecting business with football to develop leadership talent. I think this graphic here, as simple as it is, pretty well tells us what we want to accomplish today. We're going to look at some of the real accomplished football coaches of all time as much as we can within 1 hour. And then you and I are over on the other side. We're very accomplished business professionals somewhere on our leadership journey, wherever you are within your journey, so to speak. And in the middle, there are some very, very similar core leadership abilities, and that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today. This is also the year of the 50th Super Bowl, which I love this. I can only use this year in my topic, so forth there, but this is the 50th Super Bowl this year, which with our subject today works perfectly. It really works perfectly. So within the business world or within your communities, your churches and everything, we all know what goes around comes around. A lot of business is basically developed because you do a great job for somebody, and 2 or 3 years later, somebody tells them, and you get business and everything like that. That's the way most public accounting firms are put together. I've never known of a public accounting firm that could say we got a lot of business because we advertised. We got a lot of business because we did a great job for somebody else. And so what goes around comes around. We're going to go back almost 100 years ago to 1918, where the father of American football became head coach at Notre Dame. His name was Knute Rockne. He took over as head coach of the Fighting Irish in 1918. 2 questions, actually 3. Who was Notre Dame's season opening opponent? It wasn't Ohio State or Otterbein, okay? Where was the game played? And what was the final score? Anybody know? Okay, the Notre Dame first game under Knute Rockne was actually played in Cleveland, Ohio. A lot of people in Cleveland don't know that. It was played at Case Tech. That's long before Case Tech became merged with Western Reserve. That happened in 1967. And Case Tech was a part of the old Ohio, basically the Ohio Athletic Conference, which of course Otterbein is still a member of that conference today. Final score, Notre Dame 26, Case Tech 6. September 26th, 1918, almost 100 years ago. 2 questions. Who scored? I need another cup of coffee, Debbie. Still a little bit there. I've given it away. That's what I wish I had when I was in college. Somebody put up the answer on the scoreboard. You know what I mean? Who scored Notre Dame's 2nd and 3rd touchdowns? You would have gotten this anyway, right? Who was it? George Gipp. Remember, win one for the Gipper? Halfback George Gipp. Ronald Reagan's, of course, big campaign slogan. It came many, many years later. Win one for the Gipper. Scored the 2nd and 3rd touchdowns. Now, to me, this is, as you look back today, this would not have meant anything in 1918. But as you look back today, and you ask who scored Notre Dame's first touchdown, this is a historic touchdown. The first touchdown ever scored for a Knute Rockne coach team at Notre Dame. Who was that? Who scored the touchdown? Jim Canarucci, do you know? I thought maybe you might, because Jim is actually a owner of the Green Bay Packers. Jim actually owns stock in the Green Bay Packers. And the guy that scored the very first touchdown for a Knute Rockne coach team at Notre Dame, his name was Curly Lambeau. How about that, huh? What goes around comes around. Now, here's what's going to happen. There's the 1918 Notre Dame team. You see Rockne's over on the right there, on the what would be on your left. The second from him is Curly Lambeau, and in the middle of that back row, of course, is George Gipp. Now, let's move ahead a year. Curly's a pretty ambitious guy. Curly's going to go back to his hometown of Green Bay, Wisconsin. He's going to take a job with what is known as the Indian Packing Company, and pretty soon it'll become known as the Acme Packing Company. After he's been there about a year, he persuades the ownership of the Indian Acme Packing Company to appropriate $500 so that they can start a semi-pro football team. This is kind of known as the Acme Packers at that time. You'll notice the colors, blue and gold. Who would have thought that the Green Bay Packers would have blue as their colors? Why is it blue and gold? Notre Dame colors. The whole offense is Rockney's offense. They run out of the old Notre Dame box formation. That's the way this team really got started. In 1923, a city organization will be formed. You weren't there, Jim, I know, in 1923. And it'll become owned by the city, and they will change their name to the Green Bay Packers, and the colors at that time will change to green. Now, Curly's a pretty ambitious guy. Not only does he work for the Indian Packing Company, coach the Packers, he coaches Green Bay East High School. Green Bay East High School will win the Wisconsin State Championship in 1920. And he's got one of the most fabulous players on that team that he's ever seen, Wisconsin's ever seen. So much so that Lambeau says, you need to go to Notre Dame and play under my old coach, Newt Rockney. That kid will end up on the South Bend campus, and in his senior year of 1924, he will be the left halfback of probably the most famous backfield ever assembled, the Four Horsemen of Notre Dame of 1924. His name is Jim Crowley, out of Green Bay, Wisconsin. Now, some of you can see where this is headed. Crowley will be so enthused with football because he's been coached by Lambeau. Now he's been coached 4 years by Newt Rockney. He will go into coaching himself. And he'll become an assistant at the University of Georgia. He'll go to Michigan State for 5 years, 1928 through 1932. He will leave Michigan State and go to Fordham University in 1933. Why would somebody leave Michigan State to go to Fordham? Because in 1933, it was a much bigger job. Today, I don't think we're going to see Mark D'Antonio leave Michigan State to go to Fordham, but that's what it was then. Now, here's where everything really comes around. What goes around comes around. This guy will become an excellent coach. He'll win more than 75% of his games. He'll almost win the national championship at Fordham twice. His lines are so great that they earn that reputation of the 7 blocks of granite. The right guard on 3 of those teams is an Italian Catholic kid out of Brooklyn, New York, by the name of Vince Lombardi. Born and raised on the streets of Brooklyn, educated in the South Bronx. You ever been to the South Bronx? I've gone up there many times to study Lombardi. Don't go alone and don't go at night. You go up to the South. One of the most beautiful campuses, though, once you step off the streets of the Bronx into the Fordham campus. It's a beautiful, beautiful campus. Now, here's what's going to happen. This guy Lombardi will decide, since he can't get a job in the business world, he'll go into coaching himself. It was kind of a default situation. Vince Lombardi did not plan to be a football coach. He's a business administration major, but he can't find a job, and the quarterback of that team, a man by the name of Andy Pellew, commonly known as Handy Andy, will call him and offer him an assistant coaching position at St. Cecilia High School. He'll be there 8 years. He'll go back to Fordham as an assistant coach for 2 years, and those 2 years are a disaster. The head coach then is a man by the name of Ed Danowski. Ed Danowski's been a great quarterback at Fordham. He's also been a great quarterback in the National Football League with the hometown New York Football Giants. Being a great football player does not make you a leader, especially if you're not willing to work at it. And Danowski doesn't work at it. He's probably a pretty nice guy. He's an honest guy. He just doesn't work very hard. And Lombardi's a real go-getter. This doesn't work at all. This is like water and gasoline trying to mix. He's fortunate he only has to stay there 2 years. He does the best he can. But he'll end up on his feet. He'll go to Army and spend 5 years under Red Blake, one of the great football coaches of all time, who was raised in Dayton, Ohio, actually started out his college career at Miami of Ohio. Then World War I came along, and he went to West Point and ended up graduating from West Point, serving his country, and becomes head coach at Army. 5 years at Army, can't get a head coaching position. Lombardi says, what am I going to do? I'm good enough to be a head coach, and all these years as an assistant. So he's going to go with the New York Giants, a change of scenery. 5 years there, no head coaching positions come up. He's almost ready to quit. 1959, it's a good thing he didn't quit. He will finally get that first offer to become a head coach in Green Bay. Now, we're talking about what goes around comes around. Who would have ever guessed in 1918 when Curly Lambeau, right up here in Cleveland, Ohio, scored the very first touchdown for a Newt Rockne coach football team? We talk about leadership of all different types. It's going to happen now for 50 years. But this is the way it's going to end up. You couldn't write a story like this, I don't think. Here's what's going to happen. This is what it was like before Lombardi got to Green Bay. Was he their first choice? He was their fourth choice. Why was he their fourth choice? Because the job was so bad, the other three guys turned it down, including a man by the name of Forrest Evashevski, who to this day is probably the greatest coach in the University of Iowa football history. And it's not very far from Iowa City up to Green Bay. I've been to Iowa City to cover games many times. And Evashevski turned the thing down. Now, what's going to happen with a change in leadership? And we're going to look a few minutes here, what that leadership was all about. But look what happened when you get a change in leadership at the top. It's a monumental thing. This guy was so overqualified for the job, basically, but for whatever reason, he just couldn't get that job. Persistence, when you believe in yourself, is so important. If nobody else believes in you, if you believe in yourself, just stay at it. Just stay at it. Now, 1968, he's going to retire as coach and maintain his position as general manager. You and I are talking to start off this morning about what goes around comes around. And you'll notice that we purposely had those three colors. Notre Dame blue, Fordham red is going to become Green Bay green. And Vince Lombardi will retire as head coach of the Green Bay Packers 50 years after Curly Lambeau scored that very first touchdown for Newt Rockne's team up in Cleveland, Ohio. Now, in the time we have together today, in our all-day program or our half-day program, we really go into what happened all the way along from basically when he took the job at Fordham, or basically when he left Fordham and took the job in Green Bay, all the things that contributed to Vince Lombardi's leadership abilities. In our time today, let's move to 1954. 1954, basically, Lombardi's really getting kind of frustrated. Keep in mind now, he's been at St. Cecilia 8 years. He's been at Fordham 2 more years. He's been at Army 5 years now. That's 15 years. Would you wait 15 years in your career to get your first management position, so to speak? Well, you might, but a lot of people wouldn't. A lot of people wouldn't have to, especially if you're as good as Lombardi, but for whatever reason, he had to. Now, there's no head coaching positions offered, so hey, why don't you leave the college scene and try the pros? The New York Football Giants have fallen on hard times. They've had great teams, but in 1953, they've only won 3 games, and they have a leader there that basically gives us something that we already know in the way of leadership ability, but he won't do anything about it. His name is Steve Owen. Now, if you have people in your organization like this, it's a problem. They're trying to do things the way they did them 20 years ago. It's not going to work. Steve Owen was a great coach. In fact, he was a great football player for the New York Giants soon after the Meyer family founded the Giants back in 1925. In 1934 and 1938, he took the job in 30. In 34 and 38, he's going to win 2 NFL titles. This is 1953. We haven't had an NFL title since 1938. Why? Yesterday's methods no longer work. He's trying to coach football in the 1950s like he did in the 1930s, and he won't change. He's a lovable guy. The Meyer family loves Steve Owen, but they can't get him to change, and we're going to make a change. And so as a result of that, they're going to make a change that shocked the entire football world. They're going to hire a guy that nobody really had ever heard of very much from right over on Staten Island by the name of Jim Lee Howe. And the New York press, as vicious as the New York press can be, boy, did they go after the Giants. And they said, you got to be kidding. Who's this guy, Jim Lee Howe? You're going to bring him in as head coach? Why are you going to do that? I mean, this is an April Fool's joke, isn't it? You might as well have Steve Owen in there as head coach. No, we're going to bring in Jim Lee Howe. He's been at Wagner College. He played for the Giants at one time. He's a good guy. Very, very modest guy. Great, big, tall, 6'4" in, All-American out of the University of Arkansas. And Jim Lee Howe's a good old guy. He's a pretty wealthy guy. He's got a pig farm down in Arkansas, and he makes lots of money there, but he loves football. He and his wife will come up to Staten Island every fall, and he'll coach tiny Wagner College. They'll stay in an apartment, And when that football season is over, they'll go back to Arkansas. It's early December of 1953. Wagner's football season is over. Jim Lee Howe and his wife today are packing up the car. And tomorrow morning, they're going to head back to Arkansas. And late that afternoon, before they leave, he gets a call from the New York Giants. How's everything going? Good. Can you stop by the office sometime? We'd like to talk to you. Well, I'm heading back to Arkansas tomorrow. Well, can you just stop on your way? Yeah, I can do that. That's the building where this decision will take place. Now, I've taken that picture. If you're familiar with the Midtown Manhattan, that's 42nd Street there, 11 West 42nd Street. It's just a little bit southwest of Times Square, not very far from the big public library in downtown New York, Midtown Manhattan. On the 17th floor of that building is where the New York Giants had their office in 1953. Traffic is obviously a lot different then. Jim Lee Howe will come in and double park. He'll say to his wife, they just wanted to talk to me for a second or two. I'll be right back down. He goes in, he says, what's up? Well, sit down, we want to talk to you. How would you like to become the new head coach of our football team, the New York Football Giants? Now, we say the football Giants because the baseball Giants are still playing over to Polo Grounds. They don't move to Los Angeles or to San Francisco as it is when the Dodgers moved to Los Angeles until 1958. And Jim Lee Howe is supposed to have said, me? You want me to be your head football coach? Yeah, we do. Sure, I'll do that. So they have a fairly long meeting. He's still going to go back to Arkansas. You know, coaching positions are basically not an all-around year-round job. They're basically just a seasonal job. As the story's been written, it's probably been embellished a little bit. Jim Lee Howe, about a half an hour later, will come down, and there's a cop about ready to write a parking ticket. He says, hey, wait a minute, don't give me a ticket. I just thought I was going to be upstairs for a few minutes, and it just took a little bit longer. He says, well, what were you doing up there? He says, they've made me the new head football coach of the New York Giants. And the cop is supposed to have said, really? Well, you've got enough problems right now. You don't need this ticket. And with that, he supposedly tore up the ticket. I don't know if that's true or not. But here's what will happen. This man, from a leadership standpoint, will revolutionize football. Jim Lee Howe doesn't know everything about everything. He knows that. He knows what his limitations are. He's an ex-Marine, basically, as Marines would say, a former Marine. There is no such thing as an ex-Marine, a former Marine. He runs a real tight ship, and boy, does he stress physical conditioning, as only a Marine would do. But he knows that there's other coaches out there that know more about offense than he does. And he knows there's more coaches out there that know more about defense than he does. So he's going to completely change coaching in American football. And what he's going to do, he's going to take one assistant coach and put him in charge of the offense. He's going to take one assistant coach and put him in charge of the defense. Now, that may have been done to a little bit of an extent, much smaller scale, but nothing like this before. Jim Lee Howe's also a pretty good evaluator of talent, because here's what he's going to do. There he is as head coach beginning in 1954 when they're playing their games at the Polo Grounds. They'll soon move to Yankee Stadium in 1956. He's going to pick a man by the name of Tom Landry to run his defense. And he's going to pick a man by the name of Vince Lombardi to run his offense. And that's the way it's going to work. And this wouldn't work for everybody. It wouldn't work in every corporation. But this type of leadership really worked well. And basically, what's going to happen, they're going to start winning game after game after game after game after game. So much so that Lombardi now is finally going to get that chance to become a head coach. Jack Coffey, the former, the athletic director at Fordham University when Lombardi played there. Danowski is still at Fordham, and things have gone from bad to worse. And late in the fall of 1954, Lombardi will get a very confidential phone call from Jack Coffey. He'll say, hey, we're going to let Danowski go at the end of the season. We want you to become our new head football coach at Fordham University. Come back to your alma mater. Now Lombardi's spirits just changed 100%. All of a sudden now, he's finally gotten that head coaching position he's wanted for so long, and maybe it's better that he had to wait a little bit because why? He's going to get to go back to his alma mater. And then, about 10 days later, he's going to get another call from Coffey, and guess what Coffey's going to say? Coach, I hate to tell you this, but I just came from a meeting of the Board of Trustees tonight, and at least I could get a hold of you at your home tonight and share this with you. I didn't want you to have to learn this by reading it in the paper. It'll be in every New York paper tomorrow morning. So there's another disappointment. They abandoned football. He'll go right back to work. They'll win the NFL title. What are they going to do? They asked Jim Lee Howell one time, what do you do around here? He says, let me tell you what I do. I make sure Vince has everything he needs to run the offense. I make sure Tom has everything he needs to run the defense. And me, I make sure all the footballs are blown up so we can play those football games on Sunday afternoons. A little bit of an embellishment, probably, but basically it worked. And there's three of the great guys that really perfected their positions. There's a guy that, when you talk, if you're a Packer football fan, you know, if you've studied the Packers, the sweep play was the play that made it work. Jerry Kramer, Fuzzy Thurston pulling out, Paul Hornung, Jim Taylor, Bart Starr. But basically, the Packer sweep really started in New York City with Frank Gifford. And Gifford and Lombardi were like brothers. I mean, basically, Gifford really was able to take to Lombardi's coaching, and he had that sweep play so well down that when he went to Green Bay, it was just a matter, and Hornung took it to the next level. Hornung really took it to the next level. Now, he's going to get another encouraging phone call in 1958. Red Blake's going to retire. Army can't hire anybody unless they're an Army grad. You can't be football coach at Army unless you're an Army graduate, or West Point graduate. But now, Aki Kruger, the director of athletics at the United States Military Academy, tells Vince, we think we can get that changed. The Pentagon has said that, hey, that's an outdated rule. He gets another call in about 10 days, says, guess what? They're not going to change it, and we're going to promote Dale Hall. Why are we going to promote Dale Hall? Because he's the best coach available that's a West Point graduate. He's not as good as you, so there's another major disappointment. 1959, of course, this will happen. He'll finally get the job in Green Bay. There's a Lombardi family getting ready to move from New York City to Green Bay, Wisconsin. We hear in this country so many times of the young man or woman that grows up in a small rural town, then moves to the big city and becomes, because of hard work and great leadership and perseverance, becomes very, very successful in the big city. Vince Lombardi grew up in New York City and really became very, very successful when he moved to a town of 50,000 people in Green Bay, Wisconsin. And Mrs. Lombardi did not know that Green Bay was in Wisconsin. She thought it was in Minnesota. She did. She thought that the city was actually in Minnesota. That's how much they knew about Green Bay. Now, there you can see, of course, that's going to happen. Whatever the reasons, the fact that I did not get the coaching opportunities I felt I deserved motivated me greatly. I'll bet there was a lot said about that. Let's move ahead to 1960, which is probably, particularly from a leadership standpoint, probably the most important year in the history of certainly professional football in this country. So what's going to happen in 1960? Jim Lee Howell's other chief lieutenant will become the founding coach of the Dallas Cowboys. That's an expansion team. Also, there's other cities that want football, want professional football. There's only 12 teams in the National Football League in 1960. Other cities want teams, and they've got ownerships. They've got very, very well-heeled business owners, good people, good leaders that want a franchise in the National Football League. And for whatever reason I'm not aware of, I've heard different reasons, it just doesn't work. So basically, it's kind of like when you and I might have been kids on the playground. You know, if you won't let us play in your ball game, hey, we'll take our ball and we'll go set up our own game. And that's what they did. Under the leadership of the guy right in the middle of that second row, Lamar Hunt, he was able to get 7 of those other guys together, and they said, you know what? Heck with them, we're going to start our own league. The American Football League, 1960. Now here's where the American Football League started out. You'll notice that the Cincinnati Bengals and the Miami Dolphins are not in that picture. They were expansion teams. The Dolphins came in 66. The Cincinnati Bengals, under the leadership of Paul Brown, came in 1968. But those are the 8 teams that started out. The NFL owners, they would ask them, what do you think about this new league? They'd say, I haven't heard too much about that new league. I don't know very much about it. Well, you know what? There have been three other attempts before to challenge the National Football League, and they all failed. This one didn't fail. This one had great leadership on every one of those 8 teams. They had the funds to make it work. They were paying bigger salaries to the better kids coming out of college, particularly a guy like Joe Namath, Broadway Joe that went to New York. So by about 1964, the American Football League owners, when they're in conferences and being interviewed, they'd say, hey, you know what? That National Football League, those guys, they have a champion every year. We have a champion every year. We want to play one more game. Why don't their champion play against our champion? Then we'd have a true champion of professional football here in the country. That sounds like good leadership, doesn't it? National Football League doesn't even address that. They won't even touch that. They don't even acknowledge the American Football League. Until about 1965, they no longer conduct it. And so behind closed doors, I'm sure, and this is a business, and hey, we can make money at this, why shouldn't we? You know, hey, I'm a great guy, I'm a great proponent of the free enterprise system, and personally I'm a great proponent of capitalism and the free enterprise system. And I know not too many better examples of how that really can work than what's going to happen right here in professional football. Now, in 1960, Lombardi's second year, they're going to get to the NFL title game. It's played at Old Franklin Field on the University of Pennsylvania campus where the Eagles play. I'm standing right at the 9-yard line in Old Franklin Field where I'm told the ball was when the Packers could not get one more playoff, and they lost that game, as you can see, 17-13. You know what Vince Lombardi told his team after that? This is his second year as head coach of the Packers. Now, you know, guys hadn't had a winning season in 11 years. In 2 years, and by the way, he had a winning season his first year and was the NFL Coach of the Year in his first year at the Green Bay Packers. In his second year, they're going to come within 9 yards of winning it all. By the way, you want to go to that game? It cost you $8. Probably see that, didn't you? When that game is over, before any of the press can come into the Green Bay Packer dressing room, Vince Lombardi is going to call these guys together. He says, fellas, we've been together 18 months, 2 seasons. I came here basically in 1959. I met a lot of you when you reported for summer camp in late July of 1959. This is now December of 1960. Seasons are much shorter. You have a 1-game playoff to determine the NFL champion. He congratulated them on the great success they had made. And I don't think he was surprised. He might have been, maybe to make this much success early. There was far more talent in Green Bay, Wisconsin on that Packer team than anybody ever realized. What they lacked was leadership at the top. And we're going to talk in a few minutes about some of the things that he did to turn around what some people say was by far maybe the worst professional football team ever up until that period of time. Now, what's going to happen? They're going to win the NFL title the next year. By the way, let's go back just a second. He also told his players this after that game was over. He said, you know, a game like this is decided by 4 or 5 plays. And you don't know exactly when those 5 plays are going to come. And you better be going all out on every play. You don't take a play off. If you do, you never know what might happen. And I think that's probably what happened because the Packers actually went up in that game 13-10 right at the end. And they were celebrating over on the sidelines. They kick off, and Ted Dean, the tailback for the Eagles, who normally is not in on kickoffs, but they put him in for this special thing. He'll run the ball back about 75 yards, set up a short touchdown, and the Packers will lose the game. I think it's that play Lombardi says you don't dare let up on any one play. He also told these people this, and I think this is very, very, as you look back now, it's very easy for somebody like me to say this, but it was very, very introspective, I think. He told his players at that time, he says, we've got something going here, guys. And I don't think the Green Bay Packers, as long as I'm head coach, will ever lose another postseason playoff game. And they never did. They're going to win 5 NFL titles, including the first 2 Super Bowls. We're going to come back to that Super Bowl now because we're talking about leadership, and what goes around comes around. It's taken these 50 years to do this. Now, they're going to win the NFL title over the New York Giants the next year. They're going to do it the next year. And they're going to come in second a couple years, and they're going to beat the Cleveland Browns. And that's at the end of the 1965 season. Guess what? You guys want to play one more game? You guys over in that American Football League, whoever you are? Yeah, we'll play one more game. And it'll happen at the end of the 1966 season. If you go back now, of course, this is the 50th year since then, if you include the 1966 season. The AFL and the NFL, they'll eventually merge 3 years later. Now, to get to that, you can't write a story like this, and Jim Lee Howe has to be extremely proud. To get to that first Super Bowl, we've got to have an NFL title team. Guess who the two guys are going to fight it out? Lombardi's Packers, and give Tom Landry 7 years in Dallas. He'll take an expansion team and take it into the NFL title game. From a leadership standpoint, there could hardly have been a greater difference between the character and not so much the character, but the leadership, basically tactics of Vince Lombardi and Tom Landry. They were two completely different guys personality-wise, but they got the same result. Landry was a guy of very few words. He was a very, very smart man. He actually had a master's degree in engineering from the University of Houston. He was an engineering graduate from the University of Texas. Lombardi was always talking, always talking. You got that? You got that play down? You got that play down? You're 6 inches lined up too far to the right. That's why the play didn't work. You're 6 inches too far to the left. I mean, he was always out there telling them things. He knew the game. I mean, those 20 years when he couldn't get a head coaching job were like the best internship almost anybody ever had. Now, here's what's going to happen. They're going to win Super Bowl number 1. Now, but this time, the Texas team in the American Football League cannot compete with the old Dallas Texans, and they're going to move to Kansas City. It's Lamar Hunt's team. That's where they still are today. Lombardi never had more pressure on him in one game in his life than this game. The week going into that game, there was 12 teams in the National Football League. He may have had 11 calls from the owners of the other teams. I doubt they were all 11 of them, but he had calls from a lot of the other owners. What was the message? It was pretty straightforward. It wasn't a real warm and fuzzy, good luck, nothing like that. The message was, you better win this game Sunday. We started in Canton, Ohio in 1920. These guys have been around 7 years now. Can you imagine how embarrassing it would be if this upstart bunch of guys beats us? Well, the first Super Bowl proved two things. The National Football League is a better league, but the American Football League is here to stay. It's really going to grow. And the score is 35-10. Vince Lombardi was so nervous the morning of that game that he tied his necktie so tight that when the game's over and he can relax a little bit and he's doing his post-game press conference, he couldn't get his necktie untied. It was tied on so tight. And one of the managers had to go get a pair of scissors and actually cut the necktie in the back to get it off. That's how nervous he was going into that first Super Bowl game. All these years of preparing, all these years of studying under some of the greatest coaches of all time, the Red Blakes of the world, the Jim Crowleys of the world, this is where it starts to pay off. And today, some people, they're not only young people, I think some older people are this way too, sometimes they're too impatient and they want instant gratification. This is a great example that doesn't usually work. Might work once in a while, but it's very rare, very rare. Next year, guess what? Same two guys are going to fight it out. This is commonly known as the Ice Bowl. It was 10 degrees below zero in Green Bay when the game started. It was 16 degrees below zero when it ended. I don't know that that's a big difference to you if it's 10 below, 16 below. Jerry Kramer will score behind the block of Jerry Kramer. Basically, Chuck Mersine thinks he's going to carry the ball, and he doesn't. And Bart Starr will basically go across with 13 seconds left to win that game. That is one of the most famous plays in pro football history. I think, Jim, I don't know if you agree, that may be the most famous play in Green Bay history. Yeah.
A lot of people think it was to get to the first Super Bowl, but they changed the story.
Yeah. It's actually the second one. Actually, the second Super Bowl. I'm standing right in the, I'm told, right in the south end zone at Lambeau Field where Bart Starr scored that touchdown many years before. Obviously, it's a much warmer day when I'm there in Green Bay. They're going to win the second Super Bowl. 1968, Lombardi's going to retire. As coach, he'll become general manager of the Green Bay Packers. And as we look before, that's 50 years now. What goes around comes around. This has taken us from the 15 years. So let's take a quick little review of that. Now we're going to look at some of the leadership characteristics of Vince Lombardi here. Newt Rockne will coach his first game at Case. Lambeau will score the first touchdown. Lambeau will go back to Green Bay. He'll eventually organize the Green Bay Packers. He'll send Jim Crowley to Notre Dame because he's also coaching Green Bay East High School. Crowley will become the left halfback in the Four Horsemen. Crowley will go to Fordham after stops at Georgia and Michigan State. He'll coach the 7 Blocks of Granite, the right guard of whom is Vince Lombardi. By the way, Lombardi was a pretty good player there. He was not an All-American. He was not one of the great players there, but he was really good. Sometimes over the years, I think his playing career has gotten exaggerated a little bit. It's kind of like Bobby Knight, the great player at Ohio State because he won national titles in Indiana. If Bobby Knight was really a great basketball player at Ohio State, why was he never a starter? He never started here. See, their careers get bigger after, and a lot of the people that remember him are dead now, so they can't come back and challenge it. Now, Lombardi was a good football player. He became a much better coach than he was a football player. Okay, he's going to go to St. Cecilia, Fordham, 2 years. It's a real disaster. He's going to get great coaching at Army, and of course the New York Giants, and as head coach of the Green Bay Packers, and of course he'll retire then. Let's take a look here. We're going to jump around just a little bit. We're going to come back then to some real, what we call the Lombardi leadership lessons. In our program, the Leadership Secrets of Football's Master Coaches, these are 5 of the players, the coaches that we use a lot. I use Lou Holt some. Quite frankly, and I'll share this with you very openly, one of my best guys that I got to know pretty well. And he spent a lot of time with me, and I used him extensively in this, and I don't use him anymore. His name was Joe Paterno, and we got to know Joe pretty well. We really did. He was a great guy to spend time with you, everything like that. We don't use him anymore. But Woody and Newt, Vince, Urban, kind of a young guy among all those others, don't you think? And of course, my old buddy Bo. If you don't know, I've become fairly good friends with Bo Schembechler's son, Shemmy, who lives in Upper Arlington. I don't know if you know that, Debbie. Debbie and I both live in Upper Arlington. Bo Schembechler's son lives 5 miles from Ohio Stadium. And we know who has the power in that family. He married a Columbus girl. They're living in Columbus, right? They're living in Columbus. They're not living up in Ann Arbor. That's a true story. That's a true story. Okay. Let's look at what Woody is from a business standpoint. Woody's a guy that basically says, hey, I got to a stage in my life, and I'm certainly at that stage in my life and beyond that, where I can't go back and thank all the people that helped me to get where I am today. They're gone. They're gone. I'd love to go back. I never played football beyond high school, but to this day, my high school football coach, Paul Martin, had a tremendous impact on me. He came out of West Virginia. His dad was a coal miner. Neither of his parents ever went to college. Neither of his parents finished high school. And Coach Martin told us he was tough. He was really tough. But he told us, he says, I got through college because I was a football player. And look what it's done for me. And you guys, you got to go to college. You got to do all these things. Tremendous impact on you. I can't thank Coach Martin there. And I bet there's a lot of people in your lives the same way. We can so seldom thank the people in our lives that helped us to get where we are today. Many of them are gone, but we can and we must pay forward to the next generation. This is what we as business people do for our customers and our clients. Who would ever hire us unless we can help them create a better future for themselves? We're going to help them pay forward. We can't go back, but we can sure pay forward to that next generation. Let's bring in the next guy. He is truly, in my opinion, the father of American football. Newt Rockne was a very major force in creating and expanding college football. He initiated intersectional rivalries and challenged the country's best teams. Notre Dame skyrocketed to national prominence and became America's team. A lot of times we play to our personalities. Rockne apparently had a tremendously strong personality, and he just was so attractive to people. He created the Subway alumni, a lot of probably mostly Catholic people that maybe a lot of them they'd immigrated into this country back at that time, and they'd never gone to college. Maybe some of them not even finished high school, but they became huge Notre Dame football fans. And this guy is truly the guy that, he's the Bill Gates of technology. He's the Henry Ford of the automobile industry. He's the Andrew Carnegie in Pittsburgh of the steel industry, who started the United States Steel Corporation, things like that. This guy, what can we learn from him? You can't be everything to everybody. In the business world, I think leaders that try to be everything to everybody are going to be probably a jack of all trades and a master of none. I think it's best, maybe there's a few people that can do that. I sure can't do this. I think you got to find out what you do well, and a lot of that will have to do with your ambitions and what you like, and then go get that, and don't spend time on some other things because you can't be everything to everybody. Here's what Vince said. When the Packers had a playbook about this thick. He came in, he run that down to about 50 plays, and they were his new 50 plays. They were his new plays. And he says, we're going to do what we do well, and we'll just send the playbook to the opposition. He might as well have. Jethro Pugh, the great defensive tackle from the Dallas Cowboys that lined up against the Packers in those 2 NFL playoff games, getting to the first 2 Super Bowls. Before the second playoff game, Jethro Pugh said they're going to run the same plays at us that they ran last year. And after the game, he said, yeah, they did run the same plays. The only thing is we couldn't stop them. The execution was too great. We just couldn't stop them. We knew where the plays were coming. We just couldn't stop them. So singleness of purpose. We can't be everything to everybody. We will do only what we do best, and we'll aim for perfection and achieve excellence. Lombardi always told these players, you're never going to be perfect, but aim for it. And along the way, you will achieve perfection. The third guy is one of my favorites. I wonder why, huh? 50 and 4. I'm going to recommend a great book on leadership. This is not a football book. This is it right here. It's called Above the Line. How many of you have that book? Okay, if you're in a leadership position or want to become somebody to go into a leadership position, I highly recommend this. I didn't help him write the book. I don't get any royalties on this. I'm just telling you. You look at my copy, I'll show you right here. It's just full of notes. It's one of the best books on leadership I've ever had, really. Above the Line. And leadership isn't a difference maker. It is the difference maker. Here's what Urban said. The performance of a team rises or falls on behavior. Getting and staying above the line is the foundation for success in everything we do. Now, basically, his leadership model is this. This is Urban and his coaching staff, the leaders, and everybody else that's in the leadership position, the trainers, Mickey Moriarty, his great strength and conditioning coach, and it goes all out, people that, do everything around there, the food technicians and so forth. They will decide how we're going to do things around here. That would be my definition of culture. Culture is basically, this is how we do things around here. How many times have you changed jobs maybe and found that the culture in that other organization was quite different than where you were before? Not necessarily bad, not necessarily good, but different. And I hope both of them were good. The culture of the organization is going to determine how people behave. And that behavior will provide the results. And at the Ohio State program today, we never talk about wins. We've got to win this many games, and we've got to win a national championship, and we've got to win the Big Ten championship. I think there's some messages around that it's only 283 days until we play Michigan. There's a few of those things around there. But he works on behavior. And if you have the right behavior, you'll get the results. You'll get the results. And it's really working. It's really working. Now, that's the culture of the program. Quite different than Jim Tressel. And Jim Tressel's was also extremely, extremely successful. Tressel won 83% of his games. There's only one coach in Big Ten history that has a higher winning percentage than Jim Tressel. That's a man by the name of Fielding Yost at the University of Michigan. Jim's is like 83-1, and Fielding Yost is 83-3. So, Tressel's was quite different. It's their personalities probably. Urban's a much more intense individual than Jim was. Jim is a little bit more, maybe a little bit easier to talk with at times. Maybe you're really a little bit doing it. Urban's the only guy I've ever interviewed that if I asked for 10 minutes of his time, he can do that interview in 5 minutes. We're done. In the 5th minute, we're walking down the hall, and he's going to his next meeting. I mean, this guy gets things done. Now, what does he call his book? Above the Line. Above the line behavior is intentional, it's on purpose, it's skillful. And once you step across that red line on the practice field, you better be going all out. It's almost what Vince Lombardi said to his Packer team after they lost to the Philadelphia Eagles when he said, I don't believe that as long as I'm head coach of the Green Bay Packers, we'll ever lose another game. And, you know, you got to be going out on every play. You can't take a play off every now and then. You can't do that. And, boo, that's what we do here. There have been cases at practices where Urban has grabbed a hold of a kid and said, get out of here. Just get out of here today. You're not working very hard. If you decide you want to play, come back tomorrow. But I want you out of here now. And that's the way it is. That's the way it is. It's pretty intense. I just hope he doesn't burn out. I think that was a little bit of what happened maybe at Florida. I don't know. Below the line is definitely what we don't want. Below the line behavior is impulsive. It's kind of on autopilot. It's reactive, as we would say. It's resistant, that type of behavior. Let's go to one of my favorite guys. That's probably about the last thing you thought you'd hear from me today. This guy, I don't think there was ever a football coach that put people at a higher level of importance than Bo. Everybody else, a lot of the others do it too. I'm not saying he was above anybody else, but nobody ever concentrated on the importance of the team more than Bo. And those players knew that. And here's what Bo told his secretary. If a player comes in to see me someday, it might be in the springtime, might be some March morning, he shows up at my office, wants to see me. Chances are he's got an issue. He's got a little bit of a problem. And don't you ever tell him that I'm in a meeting and he'll have to come back this afternoon at 3 o'clock. Because it's probably taken a little bit of courage for him to come in and talk to me because he's got some unpleasant things maybe to talk about. And he may not come back at 3 o'clock. And don't let him out of my office. I don't care if I'm in a meeting with the University of Michigan president. That's not as important as my players. You get me out of that meeting, and I'm going to meet with my player, and we'll get that straightened out. Bo was a great guy. I really, at this time, and I never thought about this when he was playing there, as I look back now, I really, really wish Michigan could have won a national title. I really do. I think he did so much for the game. So there they are. Woody's your customer focus. Newton's your industry focus. Vince is your product service focus, basically. What are you going to do? Decide what it is you're going to do. One of the most important things from a leadership standpoint that a leader can do when he or she conducts that strategic planning process is decide what products, what services, what markets, and also what we're not going to do. That's some of the best decisions you make in strategic planning is deciding what it is you're not going to do. And how many companies have ever wish they could go back and say, how in the world did we ever get into this? You know, thinking about it. Lombardi was great on that. Urban's going to give you the culture focus. Concentrate on the behavior of the people. They'll give you the results. Don't just concentrate on the results. Concentrate on their behavior. A lot of great leaders have plans. Urban Meyer has a system. And his plans fit into that system. But he has a system, basically. And it's amazing. I think it's really amazing. Of course, as we say then, Bo has the people focus there. Okay. I want to share a couple of things here in our time left here. I'm going to put a little bit of a plug in, if I may, just for a couple of seconds. I really appreciate Donato's being our sponsor today. I've gotten to know Jane, and I never knew Jane until she was giving a leadership talk, much like I'm giving today. I thought it was brilliant. And she talked about how the family business had been sold to McDonald's, and they were working for McDonald's, and it wasn't working too well, and they bought the business back. I don't usually ask a lot of questions when I go and attend a presentation, but I asked a question. I said, about half the leadership books in this world have been written by people, unfortunately, that have never held a leadership position. I mean, man, what you have gone through, have you ever thought about writing a book? And Jane said, no, I haven't. So we talked a little bit. Guess what happened? She wrote this book. And I was very, very privileged to be one of the speakers at her book release coming up, which was last December there. And I like it very much. It's really a great book and everything. And I'm very much pleased with the inscription on there. The other book, of course, I would recommend highly here is Above the Line, Urban's book that came out late last fall. Now, we're at the Division III school today. Otterbein, I still call it Otterbein College. It's, of course, Otterbein University now, Capital University. If you love athletics, if you have young people in your family, either children or grandchildren, can I suggest something? Ohio State athletes are great. I have two grandkids. They're 12 and 8 now, Megan and Caroline. I take them to one Ohio State football game a year. I take them to more. With their schedule, sometimes it's hard. I don't want to take them to a night game. And my daughter and her husband won't let me take them to the Michigan game, naturally. And so we go to a game, and we do that. I've taken them there. What's better, I think, take them to Otterbein or Capital. That picture there, we're right on the floor at Capital University in the women's basketball game. We're right on the floor. The Capital has a great women's basketball coach. Her name is Dixie Jeffers. She's been there 30 years. And I'm embarrassed to say I can't remember the name of the lady she's a real good friend of Dixie's that coaches your team. They beat Capital this year. And what was her name? Yeah, Connie there and so forth. But here, I took it there. It had to be face painting night at Otterbein. That's the Capital game. And I took them to an Otterbein softball game. I think that's 2 years ago. And they were enthralled. We were sitting almost in the dugout. When the game's over, they said, "Hey, Grandpa, can we sit in the dugout?" I said, "Sure." Everybody's gone. We've done that. Take them. It's really expensive, too. If you're over 55, I don't think they even charge you. Although I end up spending about $20 for food. You do eat a lot of food there. The other thing is, I'd never gone to a Division III football game. I can. I was going to Ohio State on Saturdays. I'm doing radio commentary. I thought I would be in Indianapolis this year for the Big Ten playoff game, and of course I wasn't there. We weren't there. That's been one of my places I've always wanted to see a game. So that Saturday morning I said, I'm going to do it. I just got in my car and I drove up to Mount Union and saw Mount Union play. They have a terrific football program up there. And when I take my grandkids to one Ohio State football game a year, this is during a commercial on the set. We get their picture taken and everything like that. But consider going and attending Division III athletics. Capital held the women's semifinals this year. That's great for the city of Columbus to be able to do that and so forth like that. Debbie, I'll be happy to get a few questions here. If we've got a few questions, and then we always want to end on time. So, oh yeah, let me give you the answer to the question. Thank you very much. Here's the answer to the question. Who knows the answer?
Towers Lawn.
Where?
Towers Lawn.
No.
Ohio Wesleyan.
Where?
Ohio Wesleyan.
Not Ohio Wesleyan. What was it, please?
State Fairgrounds?
No, not the State Fairgrounds. No, Ohio State did play some games at the State Fairgrounds back in the early days. And they did that, I think, to get attendance at the fair. They'd maybe play a couple games in 2 or 3 days. They did that. And it was often there. That's a good answer. I mean, they did play them, but not particularly this one here. 1896 was a presidential election year. Who was elected president that year? You said it. McKinley. Where was McKinley from?
Canton.
That game was played in Canton, Ohio. Why? President candidate McKinley wanted to do everything he could to bring a lot of attention to his campaign. He asked Ohio State and Otterbein, would you move your football game to Canton and play it up here as part of my campaigning? And so as the story's been written, the Otterbein and the Ohio State team went up on the same train that day and played the game up in Canton, Ohio as part of McKinley's presidential campaign. Must have worked. Ohio State won the game and McKinley beat William Jennings Bryan for the presidency, so worked pretty well, really worked pretty well. Okay, that's the answer to the trivia question. Questions here? Please.
Why isn't Nick Saban in your list? Just because out of curiosity.
Yeah, he is to a certain extent. I use a lot of quotations from Nick. I've never been able to interview Nick, and that's maybe a little bit about it and so forth like that. But he's definitely one of the great coaches, not only today, but of all time and so forth there. He's not the best interview, I'm told. He doesn't like to do interviews, and I've never attempted to get an interview. They said, don't waste your time, basically, in doing that. He does have a soft side to him, I've been told. Nick Saban was on the Kent State campus as a freshman back on, what was it, May 4th of 1970, when those 4 young people were killed up there in 70. I guess to this day, he gets really shaken up when somebody brings that up and so forth. But it's a good point. It's a good point. Pardon? Yes, yeah. Great guy. Again, just a very straightforward guy on the X's and the O's, great on execution. I'm not sure, Mark, if I was to go in and meet with him, I think he'd remember me. I think he'd remember me to seeing me. I'm not sure he'd remember my name, but I bet he might remember one thing. We were both born in Zanesville, Ohio. Mark and I were both born in Zanesville. So I reminded of that a couple of times I've interviewed him. I particularly interviewed him after the national title game against Miami, where we held him right at the end of the game. He was the guy that called those 4 plays. And one of them didn't turn out the way it was supposed to be. I mean, they ran something else, but it worked and everything like that and everything. And we probably would not have won the national title in 2002 without Mark. It really good. And he's doing a great job up in Michigan. He's starting to change Michigan some. We're going to see how Harbaugh does. It's interesting. Michigan State this year has both Michigan and Ohio State at home. And so they got a little bit of a scheduling advantage this year. Also, for the second year in a row, and this is only the second time in Ohio State history, the Buckeyes are going to finish up the season with Michigan State and Michigan back-to-back, just as we did last year, except the locations are reversed. The state game will be up at East Lansing, and of course the Michigan game will be home here on the 26th of November, the Saturday after Thanksgiving.
I don't know if you know much about this, but Urban Meyer just met this consultant from that does the leadership training with him now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Could you talk about who influenced who more? Because I heard it was kind of a serendipitous meeting at a cocktail party or whatever.
Yeah.
And they kind of really hit it off.
His name is Tim Knight. And I've met Tim. I really don't know him. Debbie, I think you know him probably. He spoke back at Franklin one time. And he has a son that works with him. His son's probably 30, 35. And they're really, really good at what they do. And I've met them and talked with them a couple times. And I don't really know them, but Urban really has used him quite a bit. And basically, Tim Knight is the guy that has helped Urban create that culture, as you might say, of behavior that they're using, the above the line. And I would have to think that Knight had an awful lot to do with that. He speaks to the team quite a bit. Knight did a lot of training for the Ohio State coaching staff before they introduced that concept to the team. So he's based here in Columbus, and I don't know if it's in Westerville or where it is. Yeah. Hey, Clark?
If you've got to pick one coach on a continuum of leaders in terms of being the most effective leader, who is it?
I'd pick Vince Lombardi. The reason I would do that is he was so technically competent, but he had a personality that also that really the players bought into him. And he was probably one of the most trustworthy people that ever walked this earth. He's also, a lot of people don't know this about him, and I'll share this with you. This is also a reason I really like him. He was one of the strongest Christians that ever walked this earth. Lombardi actually, when he got to be an 8th grader, decided to become a priest. And he went to a school in Brooklyn, New York, known as Cathedral Prep, which was a school, it may still be there for all I know, but it was a school at that time run by the Catholic Diocese of Brooklyn for young Catholic boys that wanted to become priests. And he was within 1 year of finishing, and for reasons that he never talked about very much in his life, it was a very private thing with him, but he decided not to do that. But he went to church every Sunday, every day of the week, the rest of his life, 7 days a week. There's a church there in Green Bay called St. Willibrord, and he would go past St. Willibrord and go to the morning mass, morning service, and then go to work. And when they were on the road, he knew where the closest Catholic church was to where the team was staying. If they're in San Francisco, before they get on the bus to go to Kezar Stadium, where they were, he would go to a mass there, and so forth like that. He did that very, very privately. Lombardi was so technically competent. He was, I think, had to be a very, very intelligent man. I think could have been very, very successful at a lot of things in life. But his perseverance of being turned down, his son, and I got to know his son a little bit. I haven't seen him for a long time now. His son, Vince Jr., used to be a pretty active member of the National Speakers Association. And there's a guy by the name of Mike Frank that some of you may know, Speakers Unlimited, that booked him a couple times. And I got to meet with Vince Jr. one time when he was here in Columbus, and met him at a couple of the national conventions. That's not been real recently. And learned a little bit about his dad at that time and so forth like that. Just a very, very intelligent guy. The son told me that his dad had been turned down for head coaching positions 22 times before he got the Green Bay job. So that persistence of believing in yourself, I think, is something there. But there's a lot of other good ones, but I'm very biased with Lombardi probably a little bit.
Oh, I was just going to make a comment about Tim Kite.
Yes.
And his philosophy, it all comes pretty much from Coach John Wooden.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
he actually worked under John Wooden when he was at UCLA.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
And, graduated from Princeton with a master's in divinity.
Okay. Yeah.
And I know that John Wooden is also a key
study and of
Yeah.
Jim Tressel,
Oh, yeah.
as well as Urban Meyer
Yeah,
and many of the
yeah,
others.
yeah,
So, I mean,
yeah, yeah.
if you really want to technically
Wood-
understand leadership and sports,
Yeah,
John Wooden's
yeah.
great stuff.
Well, Wooden was also great on the leadership standpoint, basically, some of the stuff that he put together there. He's probably got an an athletic record. What was it? Was it 9 NCAA titles in 10 years or something like that? 7 in a row or something like that. That'll probably never be equal there. Thank you very much for the
Help me
opportunity.
thank Jack
Thank you very
Park.
much.
Thank you.